Welcome to Hort Culture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Well, it is a warm but windy day here in the bluegrass, and with the warmth, as I stare at my desk, there are some creepy crawlies coming out of the woodwork. I don't know if it's the actual woodwork. It's probably just,
It's not like coworkers, correct?
No, it is the Asian lady beetle who has decided it's warm enough to leave my home and to go back outside. And I keep looking around and finding a new one. Has anybody else been experiencing this, or is it just me and my bad
Do
housekeeping?
they also have friends like the brown marmorated stink bug that is
We've
also
seen
joining
those,
them, like in my
yeah.
house?
Not
Both.
yet. I'm sure they're here. They're probably like feeding on all my houseplants right now. So
We have a nice mixture of the Asian lady beetles, brown marmorated stink bugs, and I assume the cluster flies
oh
We have
yeah.
a few of
that are
those,
all
yeah, a few of
together wanting
those.
to get outside.
I think they're all friends in my basement that I currently am recording from. They've all made friends, and maybe a centipede or two, and a cricket
The three
occasionally.
musketeers of
Yeah.
invasive species.
And the box elder bug.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
and the
Oh.
box elder bug.
We're
Yeah.
next to Elkhorn Creek, so we get those. They're a lot of fun. Reed likes to chase those around, and our son, he's 11 years old, and he knows what a box elder bug is now. So he impresses the neighborhood kids. Well, he thinks he impresses them with that knowledge. He does not really impress them.
It's going to be Jessica's boys pretty soon. They're going to be naming insects, and their friends are going to be like, "Wow, nerd!"
Yeah, they already know. They already know
I
quite a
know.
few insects, but they're learning from the best. So myself and
Obviously
and also,
me.
and also our guest who is on today. You might have already heard him mention box elder bug. Today we have Dr. Ric Bessin. And just to get that out of the way, that he is my father-in-law, but he is the UK extension specialist for entomology for the last 34 years at UK. So he has had a very impressive career of getting to experience all different things in the entomology world and extension too, getting to do so many different outreach programs all across the state, and probably has been to every single county in the state, right?
I think so.
Surely.
Kind of like lady beetles and box elder bugs. He's been everywhere. Well, I have to know, especially in a specialized field such as entomology. I'm always curious what makes a forester, what makes, one person or another go into this field or that. So, how in the world, and I think I've bothered Jessica with this before because I'm like, what makes you a bug person, Jessica? It probably in those exact terms. But how does one get interested and get guided into a field such as entomology? I mean, like, did you just always have an affinity for creepy crawlies or what, Dr. Besson?
No, I did not. In fact, when I was much younger and a Boy Scout, one of the requirements that kept me from getting my Eagle Scout is I did not do my insect collection.
No, that is like an
I didn't-
admission of guilt. What?
Yeah, I think I've been serving my penance because of that. But yeah, no, I didn't do that. But what got me interested is it was somewhat forced upon me in that when my brother went off to college, my father looked at me and he said, "You're in charge of the bees now." And so that was my beekeeping training. And I have to say that first experience was absolutely miserable. I mean, I did everything wrong, but things have gotten better since then.
And how old were you when you got put in charge of the bees?
12.
12. Yeah.
And
So
I've been,
you were the beekeeper, head beekeeper.
yeah, and I've been keeping bees since. So, and now I absolutely love bees. I'm infatuated with bees, and I'm a real beekeeping geek.
That is really interesting. I think bees, just in general, beekeeping and honey production has gotten a lot of people into this field, and I mean, there's just so much lore, and there's just such an attraction. I don't know what it is about beekeeping, but it's something super special that has had such an impact on so many people. And I've talked to so many entomologists, on a national level when you go to national meetings or even a state level, people that have went into this field, and they mention beekeeping. So yeah, that's super interesting. But Jessica, you looked a little shocked when he said he had not completed that.
I did not know that you did not complete your insect collection, but you sure have
Yeah,
made up
you.
for it over the years because I know you have like several insect collections now that you have there on campus and personally. So, but that was very surprising to me. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
What really got me into entomology is my father got me a job when they were living in Central America, and I worked for an entomologist one summer. And I think during that summer, I pinned 12,000 different insects
Oh
uh,
wow,
Wow.
for a collection. So
12,000, and that was for you were collecting for a project, or just because you had gotten into it?
it was a company down there, and they wanted a synoptic insect collection of all the insects in the area.
Wow.
I bet you
Yeah.
saw some really cool things though.
Yeah, lot of really, really cool things. Well, it sort of set the hook in me becoming an entomologist.
And then eventually trying to bring insects back into the country, right? Every time you go to visit, because I actually have one of these right here
Oh yeah.
that Rick
Oh,
brought me back from one of his trips to South America. So
He was bringing them in legally. Okay, let's be very specific here for our
legally,
listeners.
there's
he,
processes to
he was
these things,
not
people.
trafficking in
butterflies.
insects and butterflies.
Just
Although
expounding the knowledge.
you have been accused of releasing invasive insects in your career, have you not?
I have,
I
uh,
have never told
and,
anybody that, just to clear it up, Alexis. I've never told anybody that.
and it was one of the insects you start off the program with, this Asian lady beetle that gets into homes. That when this first came into Kentucky and it was spreading across the state, we were getting a many different types of complaints. People would complain that one dropped in their bowl of cereal in the morning, and so they had to send us an email. Or what one crawled into someone's nose, and we got an email. Or one person sent me a handwritten note saying that they had seen my planes, helicopters, and vans releasing them in eastern Kentucky as turkey food, and it was a threatening letter, but
I
And
feel
it
like
was it was
that's
your
like
fleet
Men
of
in
planes.
Black.
It was
Like
your fleet of planes, personally, your fleet of planes,
Mhm.
yes.
That's what you're doing in your free time, right? Just dropping.
if I had a plane or a helicopter, I wouldn't use it to release beetles.
Yeah. It seems like there were some related accusations. The beetles fed the snakes, and the snakes and the turkeys populated, and then coyotes and wolves came in. There was this whole ecosystem
Wow.
destruction theory behind this back in the day, that one thing fed another, and then it fed another, and yeah, so that's unbelievable. That's pretty crazy. I figured during your tenure here at the university, you've seen some things, so I know that you
Yeah.
must be full of interesting stories, having worked with an extension service, especially a university, for that long a period of time.
Well, what one interesting thing working in agriculture is no 2 years are the same.
Yeah,
So
I believe it.
every year brings its own set of things that are going on. I think, and this is the entomology geek in me talking, that we got a great year coming up. We have the big emergence of the 17-year cicada, and
Ew.
That's interesting. That's a benchmark for you. A great year based on the cicada emergence. That's awesome. Yeah, love it. Love it.
yeah, and so we have brood 14 of the 17-year cicada. Well, if you look back in time, 2 generations, that was 1991, and that was the year that I got my position here at UK. And I got to see them, and I got to work with them. I got to do some testing with them. And when you really think about it, I was working with the grandparents of the ones coming out this year. I mean, there's only two generations
How does
ago.
that make you feel?
Yeah.
Well, it makes me feel younger.
To
There
see
you
the
go.
kids,
That's
Yeah.
to see
nice.
the kids
That's a good
grown
way to
up
think
the way
about
they
it.
have. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. And to mark your time with cicada emergences. Very interesting.
Very
Yeah, I was
Not
gonna
cool.
surprising, but interesting.
most of us are on a base 10 number system, but you're kind of on
Yeah,
like a base 17 number system.
yeah.
That
It's an integer of
I think
17.
next time somebody asks me how old I am this year, I'm just gonna be like, I'm too cicada emergence old.
Yes,
So
Yeah.
it's gonna become a thing. We're not gonna do that. We're gonna skip over lady beetles and we're gonna go straight into cicadas.
But it's sort of cool with the cicada because when you think about it, their generation time is better than half the human generation time. I mean, there are kids in high school that have never experienced
mm.
a cicada emergence.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
It's
I'm
really
excited
almost
for it, but that's just, the bug person in me.
so this is the big one, huh? This is the
this,
big one.
well, so
this is
we asked Jonathan Larson this. Are you a cicadivore? Do you partake?
knowingly no.
He just
Yeah,
goes outside and munches them.
yeah, riding my bike with my mouth open, maybe, but
Yeah, we got on a whole tangent with him
Recipes.
about recipes. Yes, and I did not know that was a thing, but it became fascinating. I couldn't let it go.
And if you're allergic to shellfish, please do not eat them.
Or cockroaches.
yes.
For those of you who indulge
Or
in the
you have taste
cockroach.
buds. Don't eat them. Don't eat them.
But I've had people tell me, a little bit of butter and some garlic and sauteing them. And,
Oh,
no,
that's not fair. You could deep fry or do that process you just mentioned to anything and eat it. That is not fair. Yes, but
a little bit of salt. And, you have to season them properly.
I like a good crunchy thing. I mean, I'm not opposed.
well, then on a future episode, folks, you heard Alexis just commit to that episode where she eats cicadas live on camera.
I mean, if they're buttered, salted, and sauteed, it's fine. I'm cool. I'm good.
Mid-May we can work that out.
I like this. I like where this is
Sounds
going
like
a
we need
lot.
to put it on the calendar.
Have a special.
Celebrating my second cicada. Actually, I was not quite in the universe in May of 1991.
So, are you one of those that you have not, like Dr. Besson was talking about? You have not experienced this amazingness.
Apparently not. Yeah, I missed them by a couple months.
So what can we
Here we
expect? I
go.
know
Wait,
that
Alexis, you're 16 years old.
Yeah. From the
No,
last emergence, from the
There was
emergency.
another one in 2008.
that's true. Okay,
Yeah.
so instead of three,
Yeah.
I should be 3 cicada years old. 3 cicada emergence.
We have to
years
get
old,
used to
almost.
this new
This is your third
universal
one.
system of
Yeah.
cicada.
Yeah,
Yeah.
figuring out how
Yeah.
old we are by cicadas.
Because there was
Yeah.
another emergence last year, correct? That was the 14-year cicada.
No, that was a 17-year and a 13-year,
Okay.
and it made a lot of media coverage
Yes.
nationwide because we had 2 different broods
Mm.
Yeah.
emerging at the same time in the same place. And you think about it mathematically, a 13-year brood and a 17-year brood synchronizing, and the math is daunting.
Are we going to see more cicadas this time around based on this emergence than then? Probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the central and eastern part of the state.
Oh, gotcha.
If you draw a line between Henderson and Hopkinsville, west of that, you probably will not see them. East of that, there's a good chance that at least somewhere in your county, there's going to be a big emergence. They're not county-wide, but they're pockets within counties.
Have you ever talked to anyone that was totally unprepared and called you not in a panic. I don't want to say. Yeah. Have you ever been contacted by anyone just really in a state over these, not expecting them, or have you ever received any phone calls like that?
With the periodical cicada, no, but
Mhm.
there have been other insects that have shown up that people are freaked out about.
This
For
seems like good stuff. Yeah. Like what? Yeah.
well, just a couple of years ago, I think it was 3 years ago when we had the big fall armyworm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And they
And
just
in fact, I went out on a home visit with Alexis,
Mhm.
and
Oh.
there were other pictures where people would have an outdoor swimming pool, and there would be thousands of egg masses on
Mhm.
this swimming pool. And people's porch lights being, inundated with moths at night and things like that. So, uh,
That was a wild time because some people were getting, like,
Hmm.
very upset how my yard is completely destroyed, but my neighbor's yard is fine. Why are they eating my yard, right? And not my neighbors.
I don't know, man.
Well, they reached their full, they
Yeah.
filled their bellies and they were done time they got to your neighbors, right?
Sorry. You left your porch light on, and there they were.
You drew them in.
You drew 'em right in.
They saw the Navy and Marine Corps flag out front and said, "This is not
Don't
a front."
don't want
Don't
to
tread
fool
Little
on my
rivalry,
lawn.
the
Yep.
army worms. So you've mentioned this kind of going out for home visits and stuff like that, and we have some people who listen who aren't necessarily super familiar with the way extension works, or they only ever talk to their agent. And we don't have to spend a really long time on this, but I think it might be helpful, or I'd be interested to just hear kind of how you think about participating in this extension thing, and like if that's changed over time, but also like what is a typical process for how does it that you end up out looking at somebody's farm or somebody's house? What does that look like?
yeah, and so extension has changed over time. Extension will change in the future. Technology has really affected extension. We need to use technology to become more efficient, to help people to greater extent. Now, in terms of my philosophy on extension, I've always thought of extension as a two-way street.
Hmm.
That not only do we send information out, but when there are interesting things that are going on out there, and we hear about things that we want to see, we go out and make visits, not only to help people, but also to learn. And so years ago, when I went out with Alexis, that was right at the start of that fall armyworm infestation, and going out to make sure what it was, what we were saying, and making sure our messages were on target. So I learn when I go out on these visits, and I also give people information for this. And so, yeah, I think it needs to be a two-way street.
And I'd say cameras and things. You mentioned technology. Uh, I'm sure processes. I mean, you probably came in at. I came in at a time of extension almost 30 years ago. Like email was just becoming a thing, and now it's a little bit easier, isn't it, for people to snap a very high quality picture and get to you. So you've probably seen some process changes in the way we do things, even though we're very hands on. Things change over time. That's a great point.
Yeah, I remember when I first started in extension. Yes, we had email, but our computers had dial-up modems. You get the sound of the 14.4 kbaud modem
The
connected,
original, yeah.
and hoping that it would connect. And so, things have gotten a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
Everyone
Yeah, I
used to
think
have to Oh, go ahead, Brett.
well, I was just going to say the thing that I think is really cool just about the way that this works is that at least in Kentucky it still works this way that you in your county you have this person you can go and ask a question to, and if they and many times they're going to know the answer. So if you have some insect issue and they've seen it a million times, they're going to tell you, but they might say, let me talk to some people and get back with you. And that's an opportunity for them to talk with you. It's just this really neat way of sharing information and sharing science with the public. And I just think that that campus county connection sometimes is not, people don't necessarily understand that, like, yeah, I'm
Mhm.
going to go talk to this professor on campus who has a really, really strong knowledge about this thing and then bring it back to you. And I just think that that's really cool. And obviously we lean pretty heavily into the technology and the ability to do that, but it could very well be that if you've gone to your extension office and asked for a issue with some sort of insect, that maybe your extension agent actually went and talked with Rick and got some information. I just think that that connection of how we all fit together is something that I want people to see and understand, because we don't keep these things around unless we appreciate them and value them. So
And even as an
Yeah.
on the inside of the service, as a county extension agent, I'm county based now. That was my first question. I remember distinctly coming into extension, and my first question was, because I was like, oh gosh, I didn't have a connected computer at the time. I said, who am I going to lean on when I don't know the answer? Because I quickly realized in extension that I'm not going to know the answer to everything. Big shocker. But it was because of people like Dr. Bess and Dr. Townsend, all the animal science specialist and all the other fields. That's what kind of kept me in extension that first 6 months was their availability. But it literally took an entire organization to raise me and keep me from floundering around terribly. But they were always just a phone call away. But if it wasn't for people like yourself, Dr. Besson, I would not have made it a month because that was my number one concern. What if somebody asked me about this weird spider and I don't know what it is? I'm going to need some help with that. But I was assured from day one from the dean and the director of extension at the time that we had plenty of on campus support. And that has always been incredibly important to me. Not only then, but it continues to be very, very important to me. Having that relationship that when I don't know what's going on or the situation's beyond me, having help, from on campus. And that, Brett, that's like you said, that's part of the beauty of our system.
Yeah, and none of us knows everything. I don't know everything about insects,
See, Alexis,
and
it's true.
What? I just offered to eat
Alexis thought
cicadas.
she was
Why
the
are you
first
picking
one.
on me?
Alexis thought she was the first one who knew
It's
everything.
just her day, yeah.
but
Rick saying no.
but part of extension is being able to give people timely answers, responding quickly to them. And one of the great things to teach new agents is to say, no, I don't know that answer, but I can get that answer for you. And, let them know you're responding to them and you're working on it.
Yeah.
I was just going to show you one thing just to show you how technology has changed. And we were talking about cicadas earlier. Back in 1991, this was my map of where the hot spots were with the brood 14 of the cicada. So you can see that
Is that hand colored?
that's
I love
hand
that.
colored.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
that was high.
I
That
love
was
that you
high
still
tech.
have that.
for people who are
That's
amazing.
listening and not seeing, it's this printed out picture of blank, counties of Kentucky colored in with like markers, and there's browns and reds and oranges. Yeah, the OG
And those were
physical
county
media.
agents at the time that responded to my request where this cicada was showing up in that year.
And
Cool.
yeah, that
I
is
have a
super
question.
cool.
Are you going to plan a party where we get to all go out and scream with the cicadas? Because I feel like a lot of us
Mm.
need that right now. So I'm just saying, like, maybe a program you want to offer this year.
Well, I'm in Fayette County, and I have to say I did not see a lot of cicadas in Fayette County the last two times this emerged, and they tend to show up in the exact same places. Tended to be the very south end of the county. And if I just showed up in someone's doorstep and started screaming, I'm not sure what the outcome would be.
We could go to a park. I
Yeah.
mean, go to an extension office
There
somewhere.
has to be a location we can do this
It would
at.
only be
saying.
weird if you grabbed onto the side of a tree and shed your skin. That would be strange. But everything else is fine. Everything else is fine.
I
He has
I'm
no
not sure how to
comment,
respond
right?
to that.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely took a turn there. I like
It
that.
felt very Men in Black there for a
Yes.
second.
Yeah.
That
So.
vibe to it. I mean, the entomology really is. I have a big appreciation for that and people that are involved with that once again over the years because, I mean, it's pretty incredible. And I'm almost afraid to ask someone with your experience and your scope of work. I'm almost afraid to ask what is your most interesting phone calls or your an interesting like memory like over the years because I'm sure you have some good ones that you could put down on paper.
Okay, I have one, and it's not directly insect related.
Okay.
It's okay.
So I was going down to South Central Kentucky to this plainclothes community, what a community where they don't have power and cars and things like that. And it was to work with sugarcane aphid on sweet sorghum. It was just devastating them down there.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down there a number of times. We did some research trials and all that. That's work related stuff. But at one point, uh, the a group of kids were showing me they were releasing these pigeons, and the pigeons were flying over their barns, and then they would just sort of seize up and tumble down in the air, and then fly again after about dropping 100 feet. And I said, what are those? And they said, oh, these are tumbling pigeons. And I said, they're really cool. And we talked about it for a little while. Then I said, oh, well, we don't have any tumbling pigeons in our neighborhood, but my neighbor has homing pigeons. And they thought that was really cool. They said, well, we've been looking to try and get homing pigeons because we want to communicate with family members across the river and across the valley and stuff, and it would be great if we had homing pigeons to do that. And so I said, well, let me ask my neighbor. And he gave me 8 homing pigeons. I went down there on a Saturday with my personal vehicle. I dropped off 8 homing pigeons to this community, and they really like it. They're breeding them up, and they're still using them. And the interesting thing is we have to write success stories with extension. And so with my twisted sense of humor, I wrote it up as providing communication technology for an underserved audience.
There you go.
Community
Yeah.
and economic development.
Hey, listen, he just wordsmithed that up way before AI. I just want to point that out. He had no help with that.
And
He came up with that himself.
This wasn't that long ago, right?
Oh,
Like,
wow.
6-7 years ago, something like
so
that.
yeah, more
yeah, so
recently.
still,
Wow.
like very recent, I would say. That's awesome.
Now I want to know how to train homing pigeons.
I know we're gonna have
A
so
new
much
deep dive
interest.
for me.
Alexis, we could
and
send them across the lake to each
Not
other.
only homing
Oh,
to
pigeons, but
communicate.
Who
Homing
needs
What's
cell
their
phones
range?
when we have
What's
homing
their
pigeons?
range? I wonder.
I know they have races with homing pigeons that go 100 miles or more.
Oh
Oh,
my!
we could totally communicate with humming pigeons then.
Listen,
Well,
this is
I was
changing
curious.
the game.
I don't know what this is about my personality, but I was more curious about the tumbling pigeons than the homing pigeons. And
You're talking about
I
like the
just-
drop velocity. What's the
Yeah.
velocity of a tumbling pigeon? Yeah.
so I just briefly looked in it because I was curious. Is it
It's
like
the Monty Python in you, Brett? I know.
like the
it is.
myotonic goats? The fainting goats. That it's not like
Yeah.
that. It's like part of their flying strategy is that they
don't
drop. It's not like they're
ate.
passing out per se.
To avoid predators, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
Hawks.
Does it have like a rock dove or something like that?
Oh.
Anyway. So,
Yeah, I mean,
Things
more
you learn
interested
from
in the
an
thing just
entomologist.
dropping
Yeah.
from the sky than communicating with other people.
I was like, how do they survive the fall when they hit the ground? So, okay, I was way off base on that, but my goodness, that was an interesting kind of related story. Yeah, that you kind of went out, and then sometimes these site visits they take a turn, don't they? You go and look at one thing and end up discussing or doing another. Yeah, that's not unheard of in extension.
Life is interesting.
Yes,
You
always.
mentioned your success story, and I actually ran into somebody in my county today at the Walmart who you helped last summer, and it should be a success story through kind of as you were talking. I have a large pumpkin grower in my community, and they had some pumpkins that started dying, and they ended up being squash vine borer. But what you were able to do as another part of like your job because you have graduate students often, right? You have I don't even know how many graduate students you've had over the years, but they were able to come out and do trapping. So then you could tell that grower exactly when the squash vine borers were active and spray. And he didn't lose any pumpkins this last year. And so he actually brought that up to me this morning as we were both getting dog food about the success of that program and wondering about more traps and how impressed he was with it. So, something so simple as just monitoring pests or then having your graduate students involved too, like makes such a huge impact on our growers.
Well, I have another, what I think is a funny anecdote. You all may have to edit this out of the podcast.
Oh, this is the good content. Yeah.
But I had to have a procedure done in the hospital. And they wheel me into the room. I'm in my gown and all that. And I meet the doctor for the first time, and she's wearing this mask. And I can tell she just has the biggest smile underneath the mask. I can tell in her eyes, she's really smiling. And she goes, I know you. She says it again. She goes, I know you. You're Dr. Bessin. And I said, yeah.
Did you look at my chart? I hope
Okay.
you looked at my chart.
I'm in that uneasy area of what's going on. And she goes, I met you at the fruit and vegetable conference last year, and I asked a question during your session. And my only response was, did I give you a good answer?
And the doctor remembered that. I mean,
And she said yes. I was like, okay, I'm comfortable to proceed then.
Oh, yeah.
Before you
Let's
cut me open, I need to know if you're mad at me.
yeah, we need to know if, you had a great outcome because I want a great outcome.
It feels like
Yes.
a meme. Like every time you see your doctor, you just be like, "Are you mad at me?"
Yeah, the one of the issues with extension is just that we never know, like, in the county that we're in, it's sometimes hard to
Mhm.
know who
Yeah,
you've
I
reached
know
and what
I
kinda
know you
impact.
is a very scary opening. Can be
Mm.
very I know you.
Good. Yes,
Yes.
like, I
Oh,
know you, but I can't even imagine on a
favorably
state
or
level, you know.
Especially when you're in a vulnerable position.
yeah,
Yes.
Right.
definitely.
Yeah.
So I have a
He's like,
question. If
"My gown was open in the back,
Yes, it's
so."
like, I felt the breeze, I'm sorry for those I may have, offended.
if you could after these years of spending time interacting with people, if there was a piece of information, basic information that you think you could snap your fingers and put in everyone's head that they would now know this as factual, that maybe would prevent confusion, it would prevent worry, it would prevent phone calls, it would prevent everything else. What would that be?
And we're talking about to clientele.
Yeah, and
Uh,
specifically about insects, not doesn't have to be about like a philosophical question about life.
and yeah, so with insects, and this is one of the things I really try and impress on people. I impress with agents and other people in that, always the first step to resolving a problem with insects, and it's same with diseases or fertility or anything else. I'm talking about, like soil fertility, would be identifying what the problem is. And, people want to know, okay, they tell me what the problem they think they have, and give me the insecticides that's going to fix it. And it's like, no, we need to get this properly identified,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
until we do that, we're just sort of guessing at what we're going to do. And sometimes, particularly when we use insecticides and things like that, there can be some underlying costs with that. And so we want to make sure we get it right. And so the first step is always proper identification of the problem.
Always,
Yeah, I've
always.
heard a quote that's attributed to a bunch of different people, probably Winston Churchill among them, that a problem a problem well stated is half solved, and I think
Mhm.
that it fits here too, and it fits to what Jessica was saying about the real boon to that pumpkin grower was literally monitoring and defining and finding the parameters of the problem, when
Mhm.
and how, and then acting based on that. So that's really, yeah,
Well,
that's cool.
that's the public facing side of sort of the question. I'll take one step further into that question a little bit, lean into that. What question would you, or what advice would you give your former self the first week or two on the job as you come to the university? If you could go back in time, meet with yourself for 5, 10 minutes and have a cup of coffee and eat a cicada or whatever entomologists do, what advice would you give yourself, Dr. Besson? I mean, if you could go back. It's a tough one. I know.
It is a tough one. It takes a lot of self-reflection. Sometimes it's some of the
Ew.
mea culpa type thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But and I've run into this a few times where uh, some someone will suggest something, and in the back of my mind, I'm telling myself that's never going to work. And uh, most of the time, that's probably correct. But every once in a while, no, it is not correct,
Mhm.
and it
Yeah.
does work. And so, I think it's very important to, force yourself to keep an open mind. And sometimes you think
Oh, that's a good one.
you know the answer and you know the solutions, but until you have evidence,
Mhm.
that it's just a guess until that the data or the evidence is out there to support that.
Yeah, you sort of touched on that earlier. That's perfect because when you made the comment about you love the connection, like going out into the field and you learn from them, they learn from you. That sort of comes full circle with the statement that you just now made, and that's true. You don't want to just jump straight ahead, give someone an answer, and roll out. Sometimes it's not that easy, and sometimes you're the one learning. Yeah, that's a great insight. That's a great insight.
And you should share a little bit about your background. That's very interesting. That I think most people find interesting is that data is really important to you because you have your master's in statistics, right? before going into entomology. But,
But
it like you said, insects were always a part of your life because you were taking care of them in different countries as well. And, but
yeah,
you
I
really have
mean,
that influence of data. You like the data.
I like numbers,
Yes.
and part of that was I had a learning disability, dyslexic. I'm very dyslexic, and so reading did not come easily to me, but playing with numbers did.
Mhm.
And so I do like that number aspect of things. But you mentioned working with insects overseas. I got to be a beekeeper for a while in North Africa, and that was really cool. And worked for a couple of years in the Peace Corps as a beekeeper, working with communities, improving their beekeeping methods. I also got to be a private beekeeper there. And what was really cool is I took over after a former beekeeper who had died about a dozen years before. But that former beekeeper was an exiled cavalry captain from the White Russian army that was a beekeeper. So I got to take over his
I
apiary.
You've
don't even
seen some
know
things and you've done
where to
some
So
go with
things.
that
Yeah.
information.
so many interesting stories,
Like,
right?
what did you find there? Were there weird things on the hives? Like what?
What was really cool is he had a different style of beehive. He had these 22 frame bee boxes that were, over a meter wide, and these big square frames. I'm starting to see more of these days, but at the time I was just wondering, and I'd heard he was like a cavalry captain in the army, and I just imagined this giant Russian beekeeper that could pick up
Yeah,
these
lifting these
giant,
huge
giant.
weights. Yeah.
And now I've learned that these are not really mobile hives, but
Gotcha. I was going to say, boy, that person must be a giant. They
Is
could
that
just
what do
no
they call
problem
that
lifting them.
style of
Is
beehive?
that like a top bar
I was
hive?
gonna say, is it like a
Kinda?
top bar?
no, it's not a top bar
It's
hive.
not
It had parallel sides on it, and
yeah,
It's
I'm not.
more like a giant version of what we are familiar
of the
with.
Langstroth. Yeah.
Okay.
More like that, right?
but almost like 4 times the volume
Yeah.
of a Langstroth hive.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Um, Fascinating. I mean, I did not see that one coming. That's very interesting. And you said what, Africanized bees or African bees over there? Or
Those were a subspecies that was in North Africa. They're
oh,
not.
gotcha, gotcha.
They're
Yeah,
they're not what we call Africanized. This
yeah,
was just on the Mediterranean.
yeah. So not that, but a different style of beekeeping altogether. It sounds like. Um, I
Weird.
was thinking it sounds more like Dr. Jones than Dr. Bessin, but yeah, the life and times of an entomologist is even more interesting than I would have thought. So yeah,
You've gotten some
fascinating.
fun artwork over the years, haven't you?
Artwork.
Artwork, yeah. You
Yeah.
some in letters.
Oh, you're talking about
Oh,
letters. And
Some
speaking of accusations
some
of
fans you've
things,
Yeah, have
acquired
you
over the
fans?
years.
yeah. I think you have to put fans into quotation
Quotes.
marks.
okay,
This, early on when BT corn was first coming out, we were talking to people about GMOs and things like that. And I did some educational things with GMOs and BT corn. And this is one of the responses I received talking about
oh, and we are
uh,
looking at, as Brett said, as some folks may be listening only today instead of on the video component, but a very creative representation of a Frankenstein. You have to see
Frankencorn.
this. Yes, it's
Yep.
Frankencorn. Yes,
yeah,
Frankencorn
hand
is
drawn.
Frankenstein as an
And
ear of
yeah.
corn,
Yes,
Yes.
or an ear of
yes,
corn as Frankenstein with the face. Were there
Mhm.
bolts on the neck? I couldn't tell if it was just bolts or more
yes,
of the. Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
oh,
yes.
so lots of
So
details.
yeah.
the
There
So
were bolts on there, but
chef
yeah,
covered
I
the
mean,
bolts. Bolts.
sometimes people express their opinions to us.
Sometimes.
passionately,
Yeah, and
passionately and
that's part of what
creatively.
makes this type of work cool and fun is that it is communicative and back and forth, and you know
He
when it veers over into threatening like we were talking about earlier, it's not so fun. But there's sometimes where it's I love this. One of the really engaging parts of public service and just like in agriculture, no 2 years are the same. Sometimes no two correspondences back and forth with the public are the same, which is another way
Yeah.
that things stay interesting.
Or classes. You've taught so many different
I was going to say,
groups and children over the years that I know have had some.
He
Hey, I know
brings
your last one.
full-size candy bars, okay, to
Oh,
his
yeah, I forgot about that.
programs, and tosses them out to the children at
You gotta watch
7:00 at
out. You'll
night.
get hit in the head with a full-size Hershey bar.
Actually, that is one moment that I remember clearly, and I really like that moment. We were doing a beekeeping class for introductory beekeepers, and I had some slides in there where I asked questions in the middle of my talk and just see who can answer the question. If they get it right, I throw them a full-size candy bar. And some of the questions I ask are trick questions. So I'm not
You
expecting anyone.
deserve the full size.
Yeah, I'm not expecting anyone to get it right. And so I have this meeting for adults, and there's this one 9-year-old girl in the audience. And my last question was a really tough question. And she raised her hand, so I called on her, and she just answered it beautifully and was right on the money. Had a great, and I had to walk over that candy bar to her because I was very impressed, and I was very happy to give it to that young girl in the audience.
Little beekeeper in training, so
Mhm.
cute.
that was not your candy bar personally that you gave away, and you had a little bit of remorse, was there? But you had to give away your candy bar to a 9-year-old. I mean, of all
She
the people in
deserved
the
it.
crowd, a
Yeah.
9-year-old just nailed the question. That's
She was on
awesome.
top of it.
Yeah.
She did.
Well,
I
I
just
have
want to know where that person is now. Yeah.
I have a final question. So this podcast called Hort Culture, as far as moving away from the insects and just asking you, do you have a favorite plant? And if so, what do you like most about it?
He's a plant person, so that'd be hard.
You can just give us one of your top 10.
I would say it's not a local plant. I'm sorry, but
No shame.
I've lived other places overseas, and when my family lived in Honduras, I had a USDA APHIS permit to import orchid plants.
Oh, wow.
And so I used to climb trees in the jungle and things like that, collecting orchids. And so I've always had an eye to look for them when up in trees and things like that. And I still think they're really cool. And so, yeah.
Do you have
Orchids.
a particular favorite genus or species?
Oh, it was no, I don't.
Okay.
But it was all those really small, unique orchids that you'd find in the rainforest.
Just
They're
so
really
fascinating that you find those, as you put it, growing in trees, and then we go to great lengths to keep them alive when we bring them out of that environment. But in their environment, they just simply, terrestrials just kind of
Exist.
grow in.
Yep.
Yes. Or you go to Florida and they exist in a ditch or on a side of a building or wherever, and then we bring them back. And very interesting. Very interesting.
The best success I've ever had with orchids are the ones I've been ignoring for a year, and they've bloomed twice now.
Yes.
They're blooming on their second time, and I'm like, you are still in the same moss ball I got you in from some random person. But the ones that I actually potted up in orchid bark, most of them have died. So ignore
Same.
your orchids. It's the rule
Right.
here.
I have one that's in a pot, and the pot literally just like broke, but it's bloomed twice in that pot, and I'm afraid to repot it because it seems happy.
Thriving on abuse.
Yep.
I know you had one final question, Brett, but I just have to ask one more. It's one of those introspective ones. We've talked about the advice you would give to communities, advice you would give to yourself. How about advice to someone that's coming in, maybe in the future, coming into a role like yours, into a university or specifically UK, your University of Kentucky, but any particular advice you would give to someone that's going to step into shoes that are similar to yours now?
Yeah, I would think, someone starting off in extension, this could be a specialist, it could be an agent, but one thing that I think, one skill that I think is extremely valuable to people is listening. That listen to what people have to say, Ask lots of questions. Always treat people with respect. I think respect is one of those. If you want people to treat you with respect, you better treat them with respect. And listening and being like we said earlier, responsive to people. People do like it when you get back to them quickly
Yeah.
with things. And I think if you do those things, you're listening, you're respectful, and you get back to people quickly, that really helps because sometimes, particularly in my role as an extension entomologist, sometimes that we just trying to improve management practices, improve the efficiency, make it more economical, something like that. But other times, people are truly suffering with issues,
Mhm.
and showing that empathy and things because they are suffering, and we are trying to help them as well. So maybe that was too long of an answer.
No, not at all.
Perfect.
It's
That's good.
sounds like that's not knowledge, that's wisdom. So
That's how many cicada emergencies worth of wisdom here, people? That's what we're going with. So things I've learned today from the entomologist, the expert PhD entomologist is ignore your orchids, listen and be respectful. If you're interested in homing pigeons, do it. There's also a thing called tumbling pigeons, which fascinating. And what was my other one? Oh, I've just blanked. I was so excited about talking about pigeons, but none of those have been insect related. And this is why we love you, Dr. Bessin, because of
a
all of your
broad
well-rounded
range,
knowledge.
yes, wealth of experiences over the years. Appreciate you sharing all of those. It's pretty amazing. I love the stories. Love the stories.
Tunisian bees coming to another
And
episode later.
cavalry and just all the related stories. Orchids, climbing trees and getting orchids. It's going to be real hard to top that. And I'm glad I'm not the next guest or the next person talking because how do you top
Or
like,
your grandkids, like the coolest
yeah,
stories you get to tell them. When I was your age, I was
Right.
climbing trees, getting orchids, and selling them to the US through USDA. Like, what?
yeah, shipping nationally or yeah, just
It's fine.
amazing.
I got one final story. Is there time just
Bring
for?
it. Oh,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
go
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah. Well, I had that permit to import seeds and orchids, and so I'd have to get them identified to species. I'd have to have someone locally declare that they're not endangered or threatened and all that, and I could bring them in with all this labeling on the box and properly packaged and without any soil or anything like that. And so I went through all that, and I had all this stuff in there. But I also had a box of pinned insects in my luggage. And so when I get to Customs and Border Control, they open up my suitcase. They find this pinned box of insects, which was not regulated at all. And they call everyone over. They're looking at the different bugs in the box. And I said, well, I also have this box over here. You need to clear that. And it's like, oh, that's fine.
Oh yeah.
They went back to the box of pinned
They were
insects.
just fascinated with your insect collection.
That reminds me of Jessica's experience when she went through the airport with her orchids from Hawaii.
Uh-huh.
Jessica, you wanna tell
And I
them?
just I knew I had to declare them. And so like every point, like your TSA, I was like, I have plants. I have orchids. And they were like, we don't care. Go to the next person. And we get to the next point, and like Sean, my husband, would be like, come on. And I was like, wait, I have orchids. I am bringing plants back to the mainland. And they were like, we don't care. And so then it was finally like right before we got on the airplane, there was like the tiniest little like checkpoint with USDA. And they were just like, oh yeah, those are prepackaged for airplanes. You're good. Like it was like, no.
You were like, I'm taking these.
But I was like claiming it as I walked through the airport because I was like,
You were
I don't want,
you were
I want
proclaiming
to
them.
take
Yeah.
these back with me. I don't want any funny business. And I was trying to be good, a good steward, not smuggling things.
Well, you go through all the regulations and all the rules that you have to follow, and you're worried that you're doing everything just right, and then find it's like, yeah, looks good. Go on.
Move along. Let me look at these cool insects.
Bringing back to my cool insect that Rick brought me back from. Where were you at when you brought this one back? This cool morpho, Peru. It took a long time to get back, and I should just say with Rick and his sense of humor, he kept telling me he got me something, but it was held up in customs for some reason. And so then he just started telling me for months that he got me a hairless Chilean dog, right? Or
Perfect.
something like that. And like he
You're
was just
like,
like,
no, thank
your
you.
hairless dog is still hung up in customs. Maybe one
This
day you'll
poor
get it.
dog. And indeed, folks, it is this beautiful iridescent blue butterfly.
Bright
What
blue
was it
butterfly.
again? It's beautiful, whatever it is. It's gorgeous. That's what we're looking at now is this beautiful blue
It's
butterfly.
it's it's a morpho butterfly,
Mhm.
Yeah,
and
morpho.
so it was brought in properly,
Right.
and Customs and Border Patrol held on to it for 3 months.
Yeah.
But
What you didn't see was the disappointment that it wasn't a hairless dog, the
Right.
disappointment on her face. Yeah. What a great
I
discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about Jessica with a hairless dog, but anyways, good stuff, folks. We're trying to get some of these pictures that we've talked about up on our Instagram, so you can find it at Hort
Yes.
Culture Podcast. You can also shoot us an email, or if you just want to tell us a cool story about you going through customs with something totally legal, of course. Feel free to shoot us an email. You can find that down there in the show notes. And Dr. Bessin is located on the University of Kentucky Entomology website. If you have an actual entomology question or maybe a homing pigeon question, you can at least reach out. All he can do is send you to someone else, right? But he'll get you respectfully fixed up.
Responsibly handled. Yeah.
He's respectfully handled. So we really appreciate you being on, Dr. Bessin, and we'll have to have you on again for more of your good stories. But that's all for today, folks. Thanks for being here with us.